For 19 years, Darth Vader was the most feared man in the galaxy. When his ship appeared, governments surrendered and soldiers ran. He worked as the Emperor's enforcer and hunted down Jedi. Everyone who saw his black mask knew someone was about to die. But the galaxy did not know who he really was, and the Empire kept his past a secret. Before he was Vader, he was Anakin Skywalker, a child on the desert planet Tatooine, owned alongside his mother Shmi by a junk dealer named Watto. Every day he repaired machinery to prove his worth, and every night he dreamed of escape. Yet he had abilities no one could explain. He could sense things before they happened, understood machines as if they were alive, and was the only human who could pilot pods, racing vehicles far too fast for ordinary reflexes. Then one day, Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn discovered him and tested the boy's blood. Anakin had more force potential than any Jedi ever recorded, even Master Yoda himself. Qui-Gon became convinced this child was the chosen one, who would bring balance to the Force. Determined to free the boy, Qui-Gon bet Anakin's freedom on a pod race. The boy won, but the victory was incomplete. Watto refused to include Shmi in the deal. Anakin left Tatooine that day, knowing his mother remained a slave, and that guilt would stay with him for years. On Coruscant, the Jedi Council did not want to train him because he was too old and too attached. But when Qui-Gon fell to the Sith Lord Darth Maul, his dying wish was for his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi to train the boy. Over the next 13 years, Anakin became a powerful Jedi, but he also became Darth Vader, not through combat or conquest, but through lies and tricks. People lied to him, made false promises, and used his deepest fears against him, until the hero became the monster. The details of Vader's story are drawn from official Star Wars canon sources. We highly recommend exploring his complete journey through these stories. The film The Phantom Menace and the Clone Wars television series reveal the Jedi Order's core rule: start early. For 1,000 generations, children came to the temple as infants. They learned to release attachment before they could form it, so by the time they understood what love meant, they had already learned to let it go. Anakin arrived as a child, but by Jedi standards, the window had closed years ago. The Council saw the problem immediately. When Master Yoda reached through the Force, he found something troubling: deep fear. This was not a fresh start. This was a child already shaped by slavery and loss, with a bond to his mother he would never freely release. As a result, Master Mace Windu questioned whether training him was wise, arguing that the attachment was too deep and the fear was too strong. They were right to worry, but instead of addressing the problem, they made things worse. And so, the Order failed to help him. The reason was simple. Under Jedi tradition, Padawan instruction was set. The same training program applied to all students, and those who struggled received standard correction rather than different approaches. The system assumed all students could be shaped through the same processes. It had worked for centuries, but it had no way to handle someone like Anakin, who had already formed deep attachments and experienced major loss. For a child from Tatooine, the temple must have seemed completely different from anything he knew, and Qui-Gon's approach to the Force had been unusual. He studied ancient Jedi prophecies that most of the Council ignored as old stories, and believed the Force had a will of its own. He thought Jedi should follow its guidance, even when it went against Council rule, and this perspective shaped how he saw Anakin, not as a problem to be managed, but as a prediction coming true. The Council's rejection of Anakin reflected deeper tensions within the Order. Some Jedi believed their traditions had become too stiff, too focused on rules rather than the living Force. Others believed strictly following tradition was what had kept the Order stable for 1,000 generations. Anakin's arrival brought these disagreements out. During his early years at the Temple, Anakin struggled with more than just emotional control. He had trouble connecting with other younglings who had grown up together since infancy. They shared references and experiences he did not understand. His accent marked him as an outsider, and his background as a slave was something none of them could relate to. The other Padawans viewed him with a mixture of curiosity and resentment, since his raw power was clear to anyone who could sense the Force. Some saw him as a threat to their own advancement, while others simply did not know how to work together with someone so different from themselves. Being alone made him talk more with Chancellor Palpatine, who had been watching him for years. Palpatine had taken interest in Anakin since his arrival on Coruscant. Where the Jedi kept their distance, Palpatine offered friendship. He invited Anakin to his office, asked about his training, and listened to his frustrations without judgment. To a lonely boy far from home, this attention felt like kindness, but Palpatine was already planting seeds he would harvest years later. Outside of those meetings, Anakin found comfort in working with machines. The temple had workshops where Padawans could practice building and repairing equipment, and Anakin spent hours there, relaxing while working, which reminded him of his childhood skills. The droids and machines did not judge him or expect him to be something he was not. Beyond the workshops, the temple's architecture reflected Jedi values: tall towers and open spaces designed for meditation. The design was meant to inspire peace and focus, but for someone who grew up in small slave quarters, the huge temple was overwhelming. Thousands of Jedi had trained within its walls before Anakin arrived, and their traditions went back thousands of years. As time passed, during his years as a Padawan, Anakin developed a reputation for skill and carelessness. He excelled in lightsaber combat with extraordinary reflexes, and his connection to the Force allowed him to see threats before they fully appeared. In competitive exercises, he often defeated enemies with years more training. His emotional control, however, remained weak. Meditation exercises that calmed other students left him upset, and lessons on releasing attachment seemed to make him grip tighter. The Council received regular reports about his progress and his problems. Some members believed he would eventually adapt, while others feared he never would. The difference between his power and his self-control grew with each passing year. The Order had rules for everything: schedules for training, meditation, and meals, along with expectations for behavior, dress, and speech. The freedom Anakin had dreamed of was replaced by structure. Meanwhile, the Sith had been watching the whole time, but the Jedi assumed they were gone. The Jedi believed their ancient enemy had been destroyed 1,000 years ago, but the Sith had survived in secret, and they understood something the Jedi did not. Fear and anger were not weaknesses to be released. They were tools to be used. Central to Jedi teaching was the belief that fear led to anger led to hate, and hate led to suffering. The Sith were the final expression of this pattern. Where Jedi sought peace through letting go, Sith sought power through emotional intensity. This philosophy had roots going back centuries. About 2,000 years before the Clone Wars, a Sith Lord named Darth Bane set up the rule of two. Only two Sith would exist at one time: one master and one apprentice. This was meant to prevent the infighting that had weakened the Sith before, and the system survived in secret while the Jedi believed the Sith were gone. Then, Darth Maul's appearance on Naboo changed everything. The first confirmed Sith sighting in nearly 1,000 years. The Jedi had believed the ancient enemy was extinct, but now they knew the Sith had been hiding and growing stronger in secret while the Jedi stopped looking. The debate about training Anakin remained unresolved when Qui-Gon fell on Naboo. With his final words, Qui-Gon asked Obi-Wan to train Anakin, and a master's final wish could not easily be ignored. Obi-Wan agreed, but he faced serious limits from the start. He had just completed his own training hours before Qui-Gon fell, and he was grieving, adjusting to the new duties, and had not asked for this student. Worse, Obi-Wan had no power to override teachings or change training programs, and the tools he had were designed for students who arrived without earlier problems. The training arrangement had problems from the beginning, but neither of them saw it. The contrast between master and student was clear. Qui-Gon had been an unusual Jedi who often disagreed with the Council and followed his own judgment. Obi-Wan was different. He believed in following rules and tradition, and because of this mindset, he tried to train Anakin the same way he had been trained, applying standard methods to a non-standard student. As depicted in the film Attack of the Clones and the Clone Wars television series, Obi-Wan suspected Anakin was hiding something. He noticed the late-night communications, the frequent requests for missions near Coruscant, and the way Anakin looked at Senator Amidala. But Jedi did not pry into each other's emotional lives, and Obi-Wan was uncomfortable with emotional conversations. His failure to address the clear secrets created a barrier that prevented the closeness Anakin needed. They were not alone in seeing the problems. Other Jedi noticed the tension too. Some council members discussed whether Obi-Wan was the right master for such a difficult student, while others argued that changing masters would only create more instability. In the end, the decision was always to continue with the existing arrangement and hope for improvement. Part of the problem was Obi-Wan's own background. He had been raised in the temple from infancy, never knowing his birth family or forming attachments outside the Order. The methods that had worked for him were the only methods he knew. Jedi training emphasized group identity and surrender of personal will, an approach that conflicted with Anakin's survival mindset from his early years. Jedi methods emphasized emotional control, letting go of outcomes, and acceptance of loss. Each principle went against his experience. Adding to these problems, Jedi teaching discouraged attachment, but never taught emotional processing. The Order had methods for preventing attachment, but no methods for addressing attachment that already existed. Emotional struggle was treated as a personal failing requiring meditation, not as something that needed direct care. The early years were difficult, and Anakin even considered leaving the Order at one point. Obi-Wan convinced him to stay, but the underlying tensions remained. They worked well together in the field, and their combat teamwork became excellent. Yet personal conversations rarely moved beyond duty. The connection remained professional rather than familial. In time, the distance between them would matter when Anakin needed guidance. As the years passed, Anakin's power grew, but his struggles did not fade. His success in combat trials surpassed his peers, yet his meditation scores remained low. He excelled at combat in ways that made senior Jedi uncomfortable, and the gap between his power and his self-control widened. He was becoming what the Council had feared, extremely powerful and lacking proper guidance. And someone outside the temple was waiting for exactly that. Then, in 22 BBY, everything changed. In the Attack of the Clones film, the Separatist movement declared independence. Thousands of star systems left the Republic, and diplomatic solutions failed. When a clone army was discovered on Kamino, the Jedi Order was reorganized for war command, and Jedi Knights became generals overnight. But before the war began, Anakin returned to Tatooine because disturbing visions of his mother made him go back. Shmi had been freed years earlier by a moisture farmer named Klieg Lars, who married her, but she had been captured by Tusken Raiders. The Tusken Raider camp was hidden in the Jundland Wastes. Anakin tracked his mother there using skills he had learned as a slave, reading the desert, following traces that others would miss. When he found her, she was barely alive, having been held captive for weeks and treated badly enough to destroy her health. With her final breath, Shmi told her son she was proud of him, that she loved him, that seeing him again was enough. And after she was gone, Anakin was never the same. This was the first time Anakin broke Jedi rules this badly. It would happen again. The boy who had dreamed of freeing slaves became a man capable of destroying an entire camp, men, women, and children, in his grief. 10 years of fear and guilt came out all at once, and in his grief and anger, he acted in ways that broke Jedi principles. This event set a pattern that would repeat. When someone Anakin loved was threatened, every lesson he had learned disappeared. Only his power remained, and he used all of it. Afterward, He told Padme what had happened, and she listened without judgment, offering comfort instead of accountability. Obi-Wan never learned the truth because Anakin kept it a secret. Hiding his actions became a habit, one that would grow more dangerous over time. It started with keeping one event hidden and grew into keeping an entire marriage hidden, each secret needing more secrets to protect it. And soon, war would give him the perfect cover for those secrets, and the perfect excuse to let his anger loose. The Clone Wars television series, spanning 7 seasons, explores this 3-year period in detail. Those 3 years of continuous warfare changed everything. The war made the Jedi Order into a military organization and transformed the Republic government. For Anakin, it provided a situation where his aggressive style helped him instead of hurting him. As a result, he rose quickly through the ranks, becoming a Jedi Knight shortly after fighting began, and then a general commanding thousands of clone soldiers. His promotions were based on battlefield results. His willingness to take risks produced victories that careful commanders could not match. But every risk had a cost, and Anakin would pay for them soon. The soldiers under his command were not volunteers, and they faced another limit. They aged at twice the normal rate. A clone who looked 30 had lived only 15 years, meaning the entire army would age out of service within decades. This also meant questions about their rights had built-in time limits. They would be gone before those questions could be settled. This was by design. The Kaminoans had built obedience into the clones' genes, prioritizing compliance over independent thinking. Yet despite this programming, emotional bonds formed anyway. Clones who fought together developed loyalty to each other, gave themselves names, and formed friendships that their creators never intended. But hidden inside each clone was a dangerous secret. Every clone carried an inhibitor chip in their brain, capable of overriding their independent thinking when activated by specific command codes. They were living people with control devices inside them. The Jedi trusted these soldiers completely, and that trust would get almost all of them killed. Yet some clones discovered their chips before Order 66. A clone trooper named Fives investigated the chips and tried to warn the Jedi, but his warnings were ignored because the conspiracy was too well hidden, and he was silenced before the truth could spread. One notable exception was Captain Rex, who served under Anakin and later had his chip removed, allowing him to survive Order 66 as one of the few clones who could resist the programming. Most had no choice when the Order came. In many ways, this mirrored Anakin's own childhood. He had been property with a control tool inside him, and the clones were property with control chips in their brains. He had been valued for his usefulness. They were valued for theirs. At the same time, the Republic war economy created pressure for quick victories. War bonds funded military operations, and public support was tied to victory speed. Political leaders demanded decisive action, so economic pressure shaped military decisions. Republic command measured success by territory gained, not lives preserved. A mission that achieved its goal with heavy losses was still considered successful. Generals who delivered victories received resources, while generals who moved carefully were questioned. Under these conditions, Jedi values were pushed aside for command structure. Jedi generals reported to Republic military command for decisions and were rewarded for results, not restraint. War changed the rules, and every friendship Anakin made could be used against him. This danger grew as the war was fought across hundreds of worlds at the same time. Battles raged from the core worlds to the outer rim, with some campaigns lasting weeks and others lasting months. The scale of conflict was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in 1,000 years. Jedi teaching discouraged emotional bonds with clone troopers, and commanders were expected to accept losses without grief. But Anakin's leadership style broke this teaching. He fought alongside his troops, learned their names, and cared about their well-being. This approach built unit loyalty that produced advantages in battle, but it also built attachments he had no training to manage. One example was the Battle of Jabim, one of the war's lowest points for Anakin. when Republic forces were overcome by Separatist attacks combined with brutal weather conditions. Obi-Wan was believed dead after an explosion, and Anakin had to lead the retreat without his master. The experience of thinking Obi-Wan was gone affected him deeply. Another loss, another person taken from him. When Obi-Wan was eventually found alive, their reunion was complicated. Anakin had grieved, had commanded in his absence, and had grown in ways that changed their relationship. The war was reshaping their relationship faster than either could process, and that distance would cause problems later when Anakin needed Obi-Wan most. Another difficult moment came during the mission to Zygeria, which forced Anakin to face his past. The planet was a center of the slave trade, and Anakin had to go undercover in a society built on the same institution that had defined his childhood. Seeing slavery operating openly, seeing beings treated as property, brought back memories he had tried to forget. His anger during this mission concerned Obi-Wan, but the mission's success meant those concerns were set aside. The 501st would later follow him to attack the Jedi Temple, and the chips would force them to obey. But that was years away. For now, despite his dark future, Anakin's tactical innovations became studied throughout the Republic military. His willingness to personally lead fighter squadrons into combat, unusual for a general, produced victories that normal tactics could not achieve. And he developed the strategy of targeting enemy command ships directly, accepting higher personal risk for faster decision of battles. The 501st Legion developed their own identity under his command, painting their armor with blue markings that distinguished them from other units and called themselves Vader's Fist long before that name took on a darker meaning. The teamwork Anakin built would make them very effective, both during the war and after. Among them, Captain Rex became Anakin's most trusted officer. Their relationship went beyond commander and soldier to become close to friends. Rex provided honest counsel when other clones simply followed orders and questioned decisions he thought were wrong, and Anakin valued this honesty in ways he could not explain. Their partnership began early, during the Battle of Christophsis, one of Anakin's first commands. He and Obi-Wan led Republic forces against a Separatist blockade, and though Anakin's aggressive tactics eventually broke through, the cost was major on both sides. It was during this battle that Ahsoka Tano arrived as his assigned Padawan, sent by the Council in hopes that responsibility for his student would force Anakin to grow up. Soon after, the Second Battle of Geonosis showed the war's increasing intensity. The Separatists had rebuilt their droid factories on the planet where the war began, and Republic forces had to retake it at a major cost. Anakin's actions during this campaign were effective but risky, pushing boundaries that more cautious commanders would never approach. Later, the Citadel mission tested him in new ways. The prison had been designed to hold Jedi, with countermeasures for every Force ability, forcing Anakin to depend on tactics rather than power. The mission succeeded, but it cost the life of Jedi Master Even Peel. And Ahsoka witnessed the death, learning another hard lesson about war's price. Years earlier, the Force had shown him exactly what he would become. He forgot the vision, but it still came true. The Mortis experience left marks that Anakin could not fully remember. In one of the series' most significant arcs, the father, the son, and the daughter, beings who embodied the Force itself, had shown him his future. He had seen himself as Vader and had seen the destruction he would cause. The son had used this knowledge to briefly turn him, and though the memories were erased, traces of those feelings remained, a sense that something bad was coming. The pattern repeated itself across dozens of campaigns: Ryloth, Felucia, Salukami, and each battle added to Anakin's reputation as someone who could win difficult engagements, and each battle also added to the toll on his mental state, as the war provided no time for recovery between operations. The Umbara campaign showed how far the war had pushed Jedi values. Anakin was called away during the battle, leaving his troops under another Jedi's command, Pong Krell, who purposely sent clones into dangerous situations while secretly planning to join the Separatists. The clones eventually realized the betrayal and stopped him, showing that even Jedi could be enemies. The clones who served under Anakin became even more loyal to him personally, and the Jedi could not watch over their own because the war was too big. Council members who should have been watching Knights were instead commanding operations across multiple star systems, and no one watched Anakin closely enough to see how he was changing. The Order's peacetime training offered no preparation for this. All the while, the Order was weakening, and it would soon be destroyed. During this time, Ahsoka Tano became Anakin's Padawan, assigned to him against his wishes, as the Council hoped teaching would help stabilize him. Instead, Anakin formed a genuine bond with his student. Ahsoka was still young when she became his student, and the war did not allow time for standard training, so she learned by fighting alongside her master. Over the months and years, a genuine bond formed between them, not what the Council had intended, but real nonetheless. They developed trust through shared danger, and Ahsoka learned to challenge Anakin's decisions when she disagreed. When Ahsoka was falsely accused of causing an explosion at the Jedi Temple, depicted in the series' 5th season, Anakin fought to prove her innocence. The Jedi Council expelled her before the truth came out, and even after Anakin captured the real culprit, another Padawan named Barriss Offee, and the Council offered to take Ahsoka back, she refused. Their willingness to abandon her had shown their true priorities, and she walked away from everything she had known. The Council had shown they would abandon their own. Anakin remembered that. Ahsoka's departure hit Anakin like abandonment, another person walking away. But it also showed him that leaving the Jedi was possible, and that the Order was not certain. Throughout the war, Anakin formed relationships outside Jedi control. He worked closely with Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, who took personal interest in him and listened to his complaints about the Council. But Palpatine's interest was not innocent. He was the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, secretly directing both sides of the war. He had watched Anakin since his arrival on Coruscant as a child, positioning himself as a sympathetic listener who agreed with Anakin's complaints with the Council. While the Jedi maintained distance, Palpatine offered friendship, and while the Council criticized Anakin's methods, Palpatine praised them. The contrast was planned. He was building trust he would later use. Palpatine understood attachment in ways the Jedi did not. The Jedi saw attachment as a weakness to be avoided, but Palpatine saw it as a tool to be used. When the moment came, Anakin would have nowhere else to turn. And Palpatine's control extended far beyond Anakin. The Separatist forces were led by Count Dooku, a former Jedi who had left the Order. What few knew was that Dooku was secretly Palpatine's apprentice, Darth Tyrannus. The Separatists did not know they were being controlled by the same person who controlled the Republic, and both sides served Palpatine's plans. Another major Separatist leader was General Grievous, a cyborg who collected lightsabers from Jedi he had defeated. Grievous was ruthless and effective. Many Jedi fell to him during the war, making him a high-priority target. As the war's final months approached, the pressure increased. The Outer Rim sieges were some of the most difficult campaigns, and Anakin and Obi-Wan spent months on distant battlefields with limited contact to Coruscant. The stress of command built without relief. In the war's final days, Ahsoka returned to help Anakin and Obi-Wan one last time at the Siege of Mandalore. They parted without knowing what was about to happen. Hours later, Order 66 would activate, and the last moment between master and student passed without either understanding it was a farewell. 3 years of war had changed Anakin in ways that were difficult to see from the outside. The aggressive behavior that had worried the Council during his training was now praised as good leadership. What the war taught him went against what the Temple had taught him. The Clone Wars television series shows the war left scars on everyone who took part. Jedi who survived Order 66 often struggled with guilt. They had led soldiers into battle, formed bonds with those soldiers, and then been betrayed by them. Some survivors never got better, while others channeled their grief into resistance against the Empire. The clones themselves had the shortest time to process what happened, as their accelerated aging meant most would not survive more than a few decades after the war. Those who had resisted Order 66 or removed their chips lived as fugitives, while those who had followed their programming lived with the knowledge of what they had done. The civilians caught in the war's crossfire had their own stories. Millions of people across thousands of worlds lost family members, homes, and livelihoods. The Separatist cause had attracted genuine believers who wanted independence from Republic corruption, and many of them discovered too late that they had been used by a Sith Lord. But while the galaxy burned, Anakin's real war was happening inside him, and he was losing. Throughout the war, Anakin's secret marriage to Padme was built on deception from the start. They could not live together openly, so Padme kept her residence on Coruscant as a senator while Anakin kept his quarters at the Jedi Temple. They met when duties allowed, and every interaction carried risk of discovery. The secrecy required constant attention. Padme had to hide her eventual pregnancy from everyone except her closest handmaidens. She could not visit doctors openly, and she could not prepare publicly for motherhood. The joy of expecting a child came mixed with constant worry about discovery. 3 years of hiding took its toll. Anakin could not share his marriage with anyone who might support him through difficulties. He could not seek advice from Obi-Wan about relationship struggles. Every problem had to be solved without outside help, and being alone was killing him slowly, though he was too proud to admit it. Padme struggled too. She was one of the youngest senators in the Republic, at the same time trying to prevent the Republic becoming a dictatorship while hiding a marriage that could destroy her career. She maintained contacts with other senators who shared her concerns. Bail Organa of Alderaan, Mon Mothma of Chandrila, watching for signs the Republic was turning into a dictatorship. These concerns sometimes put her at odds with Anakin, and the demands of both roles were huge. She traveled often and worked long hours, and the pregnancy made everything more difficult. Through it all, Padme's handmaidens knew about the marriage. Sabe, Dorme, and the others who served her had figured out the truth or been told directly. They kept the secret out of loyalty to Padme, but they worried about the risks she was taking. Some of them believed Anakin was wrong for her, too volatile, too possessive, though they kept these opinions to themselves. To maintain contact, the secret communication methods Padme and Anakin developed became increasingly complex. They used coded channels, coded messages, and trusted go-betweens, and every conversation risked being discovered. The stress of maintaining these systems added to the strain of the relationship itself. Yet no one knew how dangerous those secrets would become, or that people would die because of them. As the months passed, Padme's pregnancy forced difficult decisions about her political future. She could not hide it for an unknown time. She considered retiring from the Senate or revealing the marriage and facing the consequences. But each choice carried costs she was not ready to accept. The final weeks of her pregnancy coincided with the war's most intense period, and she continued attending Senate sessions even as her condition became harder to hide. Her staff arranged her schedule to reduce public appearances, but the deception required constant attention at a time when she had little energy to spare. Meanwhile, Anakin's behavior during her pregnancy alarmed her. His obsession with the visions, his inability to sleep, his increasing paranoia. She saw him getting worse, but could not reach him. Every conversation about the future ended in arguments or silence, and the man she had married was becoming someone different. The war only made things worse, separating them for long periods, with Anakin spending months at a time on distant battlefields. Communication was unreliable. Each splitting brought uncertainty about reunion, and each return was brief. Shortly before the war's end, Padme told Anakin she was pregnant, knowing the pregnancy would eventually become visible and that discovery was certain. Then, the pregnancy brought visions. The film Revenge of the Sith shows Anakin experiencing Force-driven nightmares of Padme in danger during childbirth, vivid and repeating, filling his sleep until he was afraid all the time, as night after night he saw her suffering and heard her calling his name. The visions were accurate, but Anakin's actions to prevent them made them happen. This was not the first time. He had experienced accurate visions before. Years earlier, he had dreamed of his mother's distress on Tatooine, and those visions proved true, and when he finally went to her, she passed away in his arms exactly as he had foreseen. His nightmares had come true before. Why would these be any different? The visions always showed the same thing: Padme in a medical facility, in pain, calling out for help and calling his name. And then she was gone. The details changed slightly from vision to vision, but the ending was always the same. Anakin tried to analyze the visions, looking for clues about location, timing, or what might cause the outcome, but they provided no useful information. They showed him what he was afraid of, but not how to stop it. The more he tried to understand the visions, the more obsessed he became. He started researching Force abilities related to preventing harm, but the Jedi archives contained limited information, since most Jedi teachings emphasized accepting loss rather than fighting it. His behavior changed in ways that others noticed. He became more irritable, snapping at soldiers under him who made minor mistakes, and his patience disappeared entirely. And Padme saw the changes most clearly, but even Obi-Wan noticed something was wrong. When Obi-Wan asked about his mental state, Anakin deflected and claimed the stress was from the war, and his habit of keeping secrets stopped him from asking for help even when help might have been available. Sleep deprivation made everything worse. The visions came every night. Anakin stopped sleeping most of the time, and being tired made clear thinking impossible. Years of war had not broken him, but lack of sleep and constant fear were wearing him down. His mother's fate had shown the cost of inaction. He had stayed at the temple following orders while she suffered, and the lesson seemed clear. Following rules meant losing the people he loved. The Jedi had no answer, but Palpatine did, and his help came with a terrible price. Desperate for answers, Anakin sought help from the Jedi Order. He approached Master Yoda for guidance, describing his visions without revealing who they were about. Yoda's advice followed standard Jedi teaching. Attachment leads to fear of loss, and fear of loss leads to the dark side. He suggested Anakin release his attachment and accept whatever outcome the Force provided. But for Anakin, attachment was not the problem, loss was. The response did not match the need. For centuries, the Jedi had debated the nature of visions. Some believed visions showed fixed futures, while others believed they showed possible futures that could be changed. But the debate was never settled, and no clear guidance existed for someone experiencing disturbing visions. Anakin's visions felt completely real as he saw Padme suffering and heard her calling his name. The visions repeated night after night, and each time he woke, he was more convinced that the future they showed was certain. The Jedi had no tools for preventing guessed outcomes. Acceptance was the only choice offered. While Anakin struggled, Palpatine offered something different. In one of the film's most memorable scenes, Palpatine revealed he had built a relationship with Anakin throughout the war, positioning himself as someone who understood his frustrations with the Council. When Anakin revealed his fears about Padme, Palpatine offered hope, telling Anakin about a Sith ability that could prevent harm. A Sith Lord named Darth Plagueis had discovered how to use the Force to protect life, and only the Sith could teach this knowledge. The story Palpatine told was designed to offer hope while creating need. Darth Plagueis had been Palpatine's own master, and the power to prevent death was real, or so Palpatine claimed. But Plagueis had been unable to prevent his own death because Palpatine had killed him in his sleep, taking his knowledge and his position. The irony was perfect and deliberate. Palpatine offered Anakin the power to save Padme while hiding that he had murdered the only person who might have actually had that power. The knowledge Palpatine promised may never have existed at all, just bait for a trap Palpatine had been setting up for decades. Anakin was about to give up everything, his honor, his friends, who he was, for a lie. The offer was aimed right at Anakin's fears. Palpatine had observed him for years and knew about the mother who had passed away while Anakin followed Jedi rules, and he knew about the wife Anakin had married in secret. During this period, the Council's treatment of Anakin increased his distance from them. They appointed him to the Council, but denied him the rank of Master, then asked him to spy on Palpatine. They used him as a tool rather than trusting him as a member. Anakin felt betrayed by this treatment. He had served the Republic loyally for 3 years, won battles that others could not have won, and earned respect from soldiers and civilians alike. Yet the Council still treated him with suspicion. Palpatine used this treatment to deepen the divide. He told Anakin the Jedi feared losing power and suggested they wanted to control the Republic themselves. The idea was wrong, but believable to someone already suspicious, so Anakin's doubts about the Council became certainties. Mental pressure came from all directions: fear of losing Padme, guilt over his mother, distance from the Jedi Order, influence from Palpatine, lack of sleep from repeating visions, and stress from years of war. Each problem made the others worse, until he could not think clearly. Every system that should have supported Anakin had failed. The Jedi Order could not help because their teaching did not address his needs. His marriage could not help because secrecy prevented honest communication. And his mentor could not help because Obi-Wan did not know the full situation. Palpatine was the only one offering solutions, and his solutions required giving up everything else. Within days, Anakin Skywalker would be gone, and the man who replaced him would be someone else entirely. The film Revenge of the Sith captures the tragedy in a single night. In just a few hours, Anakin Skywalker was gone, and Darth Vader took his place. Each action led to the next, and each choice closed doors that could not be reopened. By morning, the galaxy was different. Thousands of Jedi would die, a democracy would fall, and the man responsible would spend the rest of his life regretting what he could never undo. The change began when Palpatine revealed himself as Darth Sidious, dropping all pretense in a calculated moment. He had waited until Anakin was desperate enough to consider his offer seriously. Decades of planning had led to this single conversation. Despite his inner conflict, Anakin's first instinct was still that of a Jedi. He reported Palpatine's identity to Mace Windu. His training had produced the right response, even as his doubts pulled him in another direction. This was Anakin's last chance to stop, and he did not take it. Windu gathered Jedi Masters to arrest the Chancellor and ordered Anakin to remain at the temple, but Anakin followed the arrest team to Palpatine's office anyway and found Windu standing over a seemingly defeated Palpatine. The other Jedi had fallen. Windu was about to strike, and Palpatine claimed to be too weak to resist. Two people needed Anakin to choose, and only one could win. Windu represented the Jedi Order, the institution that had trained him, criticized him, and failed to help him when he needed it most. Palpatine represented the promise of power to control the future, the ability to save Padme through means the Jedi refused. Windu argued Palpatine was too dangerous to leave alive. The Chancellor controlled the courts, and a trial would not produce justice. Palpatine argued he was the only one who could help Padme, and if he fell, the knowledge of protecting life would be lost. Both were telling some truth, and both were also lying. At that moment, Anakin chose to stop Windu. Palpatine immediately attacked with Force lightning, and the decision took seconds. The results were permanent. A Jedi Master had fallen by Anakin's choice, and there was no going back. Palpatine named him Darth Vader immediately after, and Anakin accepted because acceptance was the only path forward. He had chosen a Sith Lord over a Jedi Master, and the Order would never take him back. His only remaining ally was Palpatine. Now there was no way back. Anakin Skywalker was gone, and only Vader was left. Within hours, the Emperor issued Order 66, the command code embedded in every clone trooper's inhibitor chip. Clone commanders across the galaxy received the order simultaneously through coded channels. And when those two words were spoken, the clones turned on their Jedi commanders instantly and without hesitation. The army had never been built to win the war. It had been built for this moment. Across the galaxy, the order took effect. On Utapau, Obi-Wan was fighting General Grievous when his troops turned on him. His Jedi instincts warned him just in time, and he escaped by fleeing into the planet's sinkholes. On Kashyyyk, Yoda was working with Wookiee forces when his clone escort received the order. The ancient master sensed the betrayal through the Force before the shots came, eliminated his attackers, and escaped with help from the Wookiees. In Felucia, Aayla Secura was not so fortunate. Her troops surrounded her during a patrol and fired without warning, giving her no chance to protect herself. The same thing happened across hundreds of worlds. Jedi who had led clones for 3 years were cut down by soldiers they considered comrades. 1,000 generations of Jedi ended in a single day. 1,000 generations of Jedi ended in a single day. Most Jedi died in those first hours, and the survivors faced a terrible choice: resist the Empire and almost certainly perish, go into hiding, or give up the Force entirely and disappear into the galaxy's population. Most chose to hide. Inside the temple, the younglings had been taught to trust Jedi Knights. When Vader entered the council chamber where they were hiding, they looked to him for protection. One of them asked what they should do. The moment showed how completely Anakin was gone. These children saw a Jedi, not a threat. The security recordings of that night would later be found by Obi-Wan and Yoda, and watching them was one of the most difficult moments of Obi-Wan's life. He saw his former student doing things no Jedi should ever see. The recordings confirmed what the Force had already told him: Anakin was gone. Afterward, the journey to Mustaphar gave Vader time to process what he had done. He told himself that the actions were necessary, that the Jedi had been planning to overthrow the Republic, that Palpatine's new order would bring peace. The excuses came easily, but believing them was harder. What he did next would affect him for years, but he did it anyway. The Separatist leaders on Mustaphar had been used by Palpatine without knowing it. Newt Gunray had started the crisis on Naboo that began Palpatine's rise to power. Wat Tambor had funded the droid armies, and San Hill had financed the entire Separatist movement. They had believed they were building an independent state, but they had been building Palpatine's empire. When Vader ignited his lightsaber in that conference room, some of them tried to negotiate, while others tried to run. None of them survived. The war that had killed millions ended in one room on a volcanic planet, with one man killing the leadership of an army that had never been real. While Order 66 swept the galaxy, Vader led the attack on the Jedi Temple. Clone troopers of the 501st Legion followed him into the building where he had trained. He knew the layout and knew where people might hide. Everything he had learned as a Jedi was now used against them. The 501st Legion had served under Anakin throughout the Clone Wars. These were soldiers he had led for 3 years who had followed him into battle countless times. Now, they followed him into the temple, and the inhibitor chips made them tools with no choice. The soldiers who had trusted Anakin now followed Vader's orders, with no idea what they were really doing. Vader harmed Jedi of all ages that night. The temple that had trained him for over a decade was destroyed by his hand. A pattern of commitment explains what happened next. Each action required justifying the earlier action. Each step demanded the next step, and stopping meant admitting everything he had done was wrong. After the temple, Palpatine sent Vader to Mustaphar. The volcanic planet housed the Separatist leadership, and Vader's mission was to end the war by removing the leaders he had fought for 3 years. The Separatists had served Palpatine's purposes, and now those purposes were complete. Mustafar was a harsh world of lava rivers and volcanic activity, where mining operations harvested minerals from the molten rock. The Separatists had chosen it as a hiding place precisely because it was remote and difficult to reach. The Separatist leaders were confused when Vader arrived. They expected peace negotiations, since they had been told someone would come to end the war. They did not understand that ending the war meant ending them. Palpatine had used them as tools, and now discarded them. She believed there was still good in him. She was wrong about when, but years later, her son proved she was right. By this point, Padme's pregnancy was visible, and she was close to giving birth. The stress of what she had learned, combined with her physical condition, put her in danger. She had traveled across the galaxy to save her husband, but found someone she did not know. After Vader completed his mission, Padme followed him to Mustafar. She had learned what he had done and came to bring him back because she still loved him. She was the person he thought he was protecting. She tried to talk to him, to remind him of who he had been, offering to run away with him and leave everything behind. She still believed there was good in him. Unknown to Vader, Obi-Wan had hidden aboard her ship. When he emerged to confront his former student, Vader thought Padme had led his enemy to him. In his twisted thinking, she had chosen Obi-Wan over him, and he used the Force against her, attacking the person he had done everything to protect. One of them would survive unhurt. The other would lose his legs. The duel on Mustafar lasted longer than any fight either had experienced. They moved through the facility, across narrow platforms over lava rivers, through rooms filled with machinery, and their fighting styles were perfectly matched. Obi-Wan had trained Anakin, and each knew the other's techniques intimately. Obi-Wan fought defensively, as he always did. His Form 3 style was designed to outlast enemies and wait for mistakes. Vader fought aggressively, pressing forward and trying to overcome with power. This showed their personalities: patience against passion, control against release, and the lava environment added danger beyond the duel itself. Eruptions sent molten rock into the air, platforms shifted and collapsed, and the heat was intense enough to make breathing difficult. Both fighters were tired, drawing on the Force to continue when their bodies wanted to stop. The confrontation between Vader and Obi-Wan ended at the edge of a lava river. Obi-Wan gained higher ground and warned Vader not to attack, but Vader attacked anyway. Obi-Wan's counterstrike left him badly injured, and he fell onto the volcanic slope. That was when the suit he would wear forever became necessary. Obi-Wan left him there, taking Vader's lightsaber, but unable to bring himself to finish things. Perhaps Obi-Wan believed the injuries would be fatal, or perhaps some part of him hoped Anakin still existed inside the burned body, or perhaps he simply could not bring himself to end the life of someone he had trained for over a decade. Whatever the reason, his choice, whether mercy or failure, let Vader survive, and Palpatine sensed Vader's condition through the Force and traveled to Mustafar personally to retrieve his new apprentice. The visions came true because of what he did. His actions to prevent loss caused the loss. The medical droids that reconstructed Vader worked without emotion. They did not know who he had been or what he had done. They just followed their programming, replacing damaged tissue with artificial parts and installing the life support systems that would keep him alive. The process took hours, and Vader was awake for parts of it, feeling the steps through painkillers that could not fully block the sensations. The droids worked to keep his failing organs working. His lungs were too damaged to function without help. His limbs were beyond saving, and the burns covered most of his body. Palpatine watched the procedure with satisfaction. The suit was designed on purpose to be uncomfortable. More advanced artificial limbs existed and better life support systems were available, but Palpatine chose older, less comfortable technology. The constant pain would feed Vader's anger, and anger powered the dark side. A servant who needed his master to survive could not fight back. When Vader first heard his own breathing through the mask, he understood his life had completely changed. The rhythmic mechanical sound would become one of the most well-known sounds in the galaxy. It would let everyone know he was there and make them afraid. But in that first moment, it was just the sound of his new life, stuck in a suit he could never take off. The first time he tried to stand in the suit, he fell. The artificial legs responded differently than natural limbs, the weight distribution was wrong, and the sensory feedback was delayed. He had to learn to walk again, to move again, to live in a body that no longer felt like his own. When Vader woke, his first question was about Padme, and Palpatine told him she had not survived. Everything he had done to save her had led to losing her. Obi-Wan had left Mustaphar with her body, and she gave birth to twins, Luke and Leia, before she passed away. Medical droids found no physical explanation. She simply lost the will to continue. Everything Anakin had done was wasted. Padme was gone, the Jedi were destroyed, the Republic had become an empire, and he had been rebuilt into a machine dependent on the suit that now imprisoned him. He had become what he feared the most: powerless, controlled, and alone. While Vader was being rebuilt, Obi-Wan and Yoda hid the twins immediately after birth. Luke was taken to Tatooine, to the Lars family, while Leia was adopted by Bail Organa of Alderaan. The children were separated to reduce the chance of discovery, and Obi-Wan went into hiding on Tatooine, where he would spend 19 years watching over Luke from a distance. The Master who had failed to save Anakin dedicated his remaining life to protecting Anakin's son. The boy who would one day destroy the Death Star was hidden on Tatooine, and Vader had no idea his son was alive. The Darth Vader comic series by Marvel Comics explores what came next. The Republic that had stood for 1,000 years ended in one day. Palpatine declared himself emperor before the Senate, and the democracy he had pretended to serve became a dictatorship he openly led, and the emergency powers granted during the war became permanent powers for the Empire. The speed of the change was part of the plan. Palpatine had arranged the war exactly to create conditions for this moment. He controlled both sides and knew exactly when each piece would fall into place. The Clone Wars were never about winning. They were about creating an empire. From that day forward, Vader would spend 19 years serving an empire he could never leave. Vader knew none of this. He did not know Palpatine had started the war or that the clones were designed to turn on the Jedi from the beginning. He only knew that he had made choices he could not take back. The Jedi survivors scattered across the galaxy. Those who escaped Order 66 went into hiding, gave up on the Force, or fell in the years that followed, and a tradition that had lasted thousands of generations was reduced to a few survivors. Some tried to preserve teachings in secret, while others decided the Order's failures meant its teachings should end. Some Jedi gave up the Force entirely, stopping all use of their abilities in hopes of blending into the galaxy's population. This approach sometimes worked. A Jedi who did not use the Force was difficult to find, but the Force often revealed itself in moments of crisis. A Jedi who instinctively saved someone became a target. Other Jedi tried to maintain their traditions in secret. They took Padawans and passed down teachings, believing the Order could survive in hidden form until the Empire fell. Vader made finding these secret teachers a priority. A single surviving teacher could train new Jedi, so the threat had to be eliminated completely. As part of this transformation, Vader's first assignment after Mustaphar was building a new lightsaber. Sith tradition required him to take a kyber crystal from a Jedi and corrupt it through the dark side, a process called bleeding that turned the crystal red. The weapon itself was made from what he had done. The suit was like a prison. Every breath reminded him that he had failed. The suit keeping Vader alive was designed to ensure his need for Palpatine. The armor was purposely less advanced than Imperial technology could have produced. The breathing machine was loud and uncomfortable, the limbs were heavy, and the neural connections caused constant discomfort. Everything about it reminded him of losing on Mustaphar. Because of the suit's design, It required regular maintenance that only Imperial facilities could provide, meaning Vader could not leave Imperial space for long periods. The dependency was physical and complete. Sith beliefs used suffering as a source of power. The dark side grew stronger through pain, and Palpatine ensured his apprentice suffered constantly. Every breath hurt, every movement hurt, and it never stopped. The only relief came in Vader's meditation chambers, where he could remove the helmet briefly in conditions that allowed him to breathe without the mask. Vader's role in the Empire was enforcement. He served as Palpatine's main instrument of control, chasing surviving Jedi, ending resistance movements, and dealing with failure among Imperial officers. His presence alone meant danger. The first years of the Empire were chaos disguised as order. Systems that had supported the Separatists had to be joined or conquered, while systems that had been loyal to the Republic had to accept that the Republic no longer existed. Vader's role was making examples of those who resisted. Early tests of this role came on Ryloth, where Vader and Palpatine faced an attack by the Free Ryloth movement. Their ship was shot down, and the two Sith had to survive in hostile territory while being hunted, and the experience showed the dynamic of their relationship. Palpatine testing Vader, Vader proving his value, neither trusting the other. Vader's meditation chamber became his only sanctuary. The special pressure let him take off his helmet for short times, to see without the red-tinted lenses, to breathe without the mechanical help. These moments were the only peace he had, and they were also when his thoughts turned most often to Padme. The construction of his fortress on Mustaphar was a deliberate choice. He built it on the planet where he had lost everything, where Padme had died, where Obi-Wan had defeated him, where Anakin Skywalker had ended. The location reminded him of his failure and his new life, and the dark side energy there made him stronger and kept him in pain. But one Jedi stayed hidden on Tatooine, watching over Vader's son, who Vader did not know had survived. The Inquisitor program was never stable. Former Jedi who had been tortured into serving the dark side made unreliable servants. Several attempted to betray Vader or Palpatine, while others simply broke under the mental pressure. The Grand Inquisitor eventually chose death rather than face Vader's punishment for failure. Meanwhile, Vader hunted Obi-Wan for years without success. He followed rumors and reports across the galaxy and tortured captured Jedi for information about his former master's location. Obi-Wan had hidden too well on a planet Vader would never search, the world where he had been a slave, a place he swore he would never go back to. The hunt for surviving Jedi defined Vader's early years as a Sith, as hundreds of Jedi had escaped Order 66. Some went into hiding, others tried to continue fighting, and a few attempted to rebuild the Order in secret. Vader tracked them all and developed methods for finding Force sensitives who tried to hide their abilities. Each Jedi he found was one more step in destroying what was left of his old order. The Inquisitors served under his command during this period. Former Jedi turned to the dark side through torture and manipulation. Though less powerful than Vader, they proved useful for hunting weaker targets. The Grand Inquisitor, a former Jedi Temple guard, led the program. His effectiveness made him valuable, and made him a threat to Vader's position. Throughout these years, Vader believed his children had not survived. Palpatine had told him this, and the lie served a purpose. A person with nothing to lose could be controlled completely. Vader had no future except service, no family to protect, no children to raise. Vader believed the lie for 19 years, until a young pilot destroyed the Death Star. During those years, he sometimes encountered reminders of his past. He visited Tatooine to negotiate with Jabba the Hutt and walked through the desert where he had been enslaved. But the past was supposed to be gone, and Anakin Skywalker was supposed to be gone. He pushed the memories away, as he had learned to do. Within the Imperial hierarchy, officers had different reactions to Vader. Some respected his power, while others resented his interference in their operations. All feared him. The fear kept people in line without requiring constant supervision. Other officers were less cooperative, and many made errors that cost the Empire opportunities. Vader dealt with such failures personally, and his reputation for responding harshly to incompetence spread throughout the officer corps. The fear Vader inspired was useful, but isolating. Officers who feared him did not share information freely, avoided contact when possible, and told him what they thought he wanted to hear, rather than what was true. This created weaknesses that enemies could use. The Empire used Vader strategically throughout its territories. He showed up at problem areas to remind people of Imperial power. His arrival on a world meant the Emperor was paying attention. Local leaders who saw Vader knew their failures had been noticed. Vader answered only to the Emperor and existed outside the normal military levels. Grand Moffs and admirals had no power over him. He could take any ship, any supply, any personnel. His power came directly from Palpatine, and this power came with total isolation. He had no equals and no friends. At the core of his existence, the relationship with Palpatine followed Sith tradition. The rule of two set up only one master and one apprentice, and the apprentice was meant to eventually replace the master. Palpatine knew Vader would try to overthrow him someday, and Vader knew Palpatine expected it. Trust between them was impossible. That was how the Sith worked. Making matters worse, Vader's injuries had reduced his force power. Losing his limbs weakened his connection to the Force, and the suit's systems interfered with Force abilities. The difference in power between him and Palpatine grew after Mustaphar, and Vader could never beat the Emperor with power alone. For 19 years, Vader served the Empire, chasing Jedi survivors until few remained, ending early resistance movements. The years passed without change. Then, a pilot named Skywalker destroyed the Death Star, and Vader learned Palpatine had lied about his children being dead. But to understand that moment, we must go back. The Death Star project consumed Imperial resources for nearly 2 decades. Vader had reservations about the station. He believed the Force was more powerful than any technological terror, but Tarkin and the other Imperial leaders disagreed. They wanted a weapon that could inspire fear without requiring Force users to wield it. The destruction of Alderaan was meant to show Imperial power, but instead, it stirred up a rebellion. Systems that had stayed neutral joined the rebellion, and officers who had served loyally began questioning their loyalty. The Death Star had been designed to end resistance. Instead, it created martyrs. Before the station's destruction, as the film A New Hope shows, Vader sensed Obi-Wan's presence on the Death Star before he saw him. The connection he had with his former master, quiet for 19 years, suddenly came alive, and their final confrontation was brief. Obi-Wan allowed himself to be struck down, joining the Force instead of continuing the fight, and his last words were a warning. Striking him down would make him more powerful than Vader could imagine. The meaning of those words became clear when Vader sensed Obi-Wan's continued presence. His former master had not truly died. He had transformed into something else. The dark side offered power over death, but the light side let Jedi continue existing after death. Obi-Wan had done what Palpatine promised Anakin, but never gave him. In 0 BBY, everything changed again. Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan got the plans to the Death Star, a moon-sized battle station capable of destroying entire planets. Vader chased her ship and captured her, but not before she sent the plans to the rebellion. The Death Star represented a new Imperial strategy. Grand Moff Tarkin believed that fear of the station would keep systems in line, that the ability to destroy a planet would make resistance unthinkable. Tarkin was one of the few Imperial leaders who commanded Vader's respect. Tarkin had known Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars, though whether he knew Vader as the same person remains unclear. Their partnership on the Death Star project combined Tarkin's strategic vision with Vader's enforcement capabilities. The strategy was tested on Alderaan, Leia's homeworld, where billions were lost in an instant. Vader stood beside Tarkin as the order was given. But the rebellion attacked the Death Star after analyzing the stolen plans. They found a weakness, a small exhaust port that led directly to the station's main reactor. An exact hit could destroy the entire station. The pilot who made the shot was Luke Skywalker. He had been raised on Tatooine by Owen and Beru Lars, never knowing his true parents. He had joined the rebellion only days before the battle, and the Force guided his shot. The Death Star was destroyed, but Vader survived. His ship had been knocked away from the station before it exploded, and the investigation would lead to a discovery that changed everything. The name shocked him, Skywalker, and he realized Palpatine had lied. His son was alive. Vader discovered his son was alive shortly after the Battle of Yavin. This pilot was strong in the Force and came from Tatooine. Every detail proved what Vader could barely believe. The discovery changed everything Vader believed. For 19 years, he had thought he had nothing left. No family, no future, no reason to live except serving Palpatine. Now, he had a son fighting against the Empire he served, and one of them would have to change sides or die. Vader's immediate response was to chase Luke personally, throwing Imperial resources into finding one pilot with a focus that seemed out of proportion to the military threat. His officers did not understand the personal dimension. At first, the discovery had to be kept from Palpatine. Vader knew the Emperor would want to either corrupt or destroy his son, but Vader wanted Luke for himself. Together, father and son might overthrow the Emperor. His plan was recruitment, not capture. He intended to turn Luke to the dark side and use him to overthrow Palpatine. Father and son together could rule the galaxy, giving Vader freedom while keeping his son close. To execute his plan, Vader needed to capture Luke alive. He tested the carbon freezing process on Han Solo first. The test worked. Han survived, and Vader planned to use the same process on Luke. Soon, father and son were about to fight, and Luke would lose his hand. The confrontation at Cloud City in 3 ABY, depicted in The Empire Strikes Back, was designed to reveal the truth. Cloud City was a mining colony floating in the atmosphere of Bespin, run by Lando Calrissian, a friend of Han Solo. Vader had arrived first and forced Lando to cooperate, so the trap was ready before Luke's friends even landed. Vader used Luke's friends to draw him in. Han Solo was frozen in carbonite, Leia Organa was threatened, and Luke came to rescue them as Vader expected. After defeating Luke in combat, Vader showed his identity. The famous statement changed Luke's understanding of everything. His father was not a Jedi defeated by Vader. His father was Vader. The enemy was family. The truth hurt Luke deeply, but it also gave him hope, the belief that his father could still be saved. During the fight, Luke lost his hand. The injury mirrored what happened to Anakin over the years. Luke chose to fall rather than join his father, escaping rather than accepting the truth. The period between the films The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi lasted about a year. During this time, the rebellion regrouped. Han Solo remained frozen in carbonite and was taken by the bounty hunter Boba Fett. Luke continued his training while planning to rescue his friend, and Vader continued searching for his son. Luke's rejection did not stop Vader from chasing him. The connection through the Force let father and son feel each other across space, and both knew the confrontation would resume. The next time they met, one of them would have to make a choice, and that choice would decide the fate of the galaxy. In the film The Empire Strikes Back, Luke's training under Yoda on Dagobah changed him. He learned patience that his father never had, and learned to face fear instead of fighting it. And the training was not finished, but it gave him skills Anakin never learned. The dark side cave on Dagobah was a crucial test. Luke entered carrying his weapons despite Yoda's advice, and inside, he faced a vision of Vader and struck it down, only to see his own face inside the helmet. and the meaning was clear. Attacking Vader with anger could turn Luke into Vader. This vision stayed with Luke. He understood the warning in a way his father never had. Fighting to kill his enemies could turn him into one of them, and this understanding would shape how he handled the final fight. Luke had seen what anger did to his father, and now he had to decide if he would make the same mistakes. Yoda initially refused to train Luke, seeing the same problems that had concerned the Council about Anakin. Luke was too old, too impatient, too attached to his friends. But eventually, Yoda agreed because there was no other choice, as Luke was the last hope. After escaping Cloud City, Luke spent months recovering and training. He returned to Dagobah to complete his education, but Yoda was dying by then. His very old age had finally caught up with him. The Ancient Master confirmed what Vader had told Luke. Vader was, indeed, his father. Yoda also revealed that there was another Skywalker, and Luke eventually realized this meant Leia. His sister had been hidden from Vader just as he had been, and knowing he had real family besides the monster who attacked him gave Luke strength. Luke had left his training early to save his friends at Cloud City. Yoda warned him not to go, and Obi-Wan's spirit warned him not to go. But Luke went anyway. The patterns seemed to repeat, yet Luke was different from his father in key ways. He had been raised with love and had not been shaped by slavery. Luke's departure disappointed Yoda deeply. The Ancient Master had seen too many Jedi fall and feared Luke would follow the same path. But Yoda also recognized something different in Luke: compassion that his father had never developed. When Luke returned to confront his father a year later, he was a Jedi. He had made a new lightsaber, had faced his fears in the Darkside Cave on Dagobah, and had seen a vision of himself becoming Vader and said no to that path. And Luke had already decided who he wanted to be before the fight. Everyone told Luke it was impossible. Obi-Wan's spirit said Vader was no longer his father. Yoda confirmed this view, but only Luke refused to give up. Palpatine knew the threat Luke created. He knew that Vader's love for Luke could be used against him, and Palpatine planned to replace Vader with Luke. A younger apprentice with full force power would be more useful. Vader's usefulness was ending. Before the confrontation, the rescue of Han Solo from Jabba's palace in the film Return of the Jedi shows how much Luke had grown. He walked into a fortress filled with criminals, bounty hunters, and guards with a plan that seemed like madness. He offered Jabba a chance to negotiate, and when negotiation failed, he fought his way out. The confidence he displayed was something his father had never achieved. Calm confidence instead of aggressive control. Yoda's final teachings focused on what Luke would face. The Ancient Master knew he would not survive to see the Empire's fall and had trained Luke as much as time allowed. The rest would depend on Luke's choices, and Yoda's last words confirmed what Vader had revealed, the truth about Luke's father, and added another truth. There was another Skywalker. The revelation about Leia changed Luke's understanding of his mission. He was not alone in carrying the Skywalker name. If he failed, if he fell to the dark side or died facing the Emperor, Leia could continue what he had started. The knowledge was both a relief and a burden. Despite this burden, Luke's decision to surrender to Vader on Endor was made against the advice of everyone he trusted. Han thought it was suicide, and Leia felt him leaving through the Force and tried to stop him. But Luke went anyway, believing what no one else believed, that his father could be saved. The walk through the forest to the Imperial landing platform felt like the longest walk of Luke's life. He had faced Vader once and barely survived. He had seen what his father was capable of, yet the Force told him this was the right path. The same feeling that guided his shot into the Death Star now guided him toward his father. Something was changing inside Vader, feelings he thought were gone. Vader felt Luke's presence before he saw him. Their Force connection had grown stronger since Cloud City. He could sense his son's emotions, the fear Luke controlled, the hope he maintained, the love he still felt for a father he had never known. These feelings confused Vader. The final confrontation happened aboard the second Death Star, which the film Return of the Jedi shows the second Death Star orbiting the forest moon of Endor, still under construction, and the rebellion was planning an attack while it was vulnerable. And Luke's surrender was timed to happen at the same time as this assault. Palpatine had planned the entire battle. He knew the rebellion was coming. He had leaked the station's location on purpose. The trap was meant to destroy the rebel fleet for good, and the Emperor wanted Luke to watch his friends perish. The throne room was designed to intimidate. Palpatine sat on a raised platform overlooking the battle raging in space. He taunted Luke with the destruction outside, emphasizing his helplessness, and every word was meant to make Luke angry. Vader stood by, watching his son's resolve being tested. The situation must have felt familiar. Palpatine had used similar tactics on him years ago, using fear and anger to break down resistance. The battle visible through the throne room windows was going badly for the rebellion. The fleet was caught between the Death Star's super laser and the Imperial Armada, and Palpatine had planned everything. He had leaked the location and the weak spot and had ensured the shield generator remained operational until his trap was sprung. Luke watched his friends dying in space while Palpatine taunted him. Each explosion was another ship, another crew, another group of people who had believed in the rebellion's cause. The Emperor wanted Luke to feel helpless, to feel angry, to strike out in desperation. And the trick was clear, but knowing it was a trick did not make it easier to resist. Vader watched the confrontation between his master and his son with growing doubt. He had brought Luke here believing Palpatine's plan was to turn him, but now he understood. Palpatine wanted Luke to replace him. The Master was preparing to discard the apprentice. This was how Sith relationships ended. But Palpatine made one mistake. He thought Vader's hatred was stronger than his love for his son. When Luke finally attacked, Vader defended Palpatine out of instinct and training. But as the fight continued, his certainty wavered. Luke was fighting for his friends, for the rebellion, for hope. Vader was fighting for a master who planned to replace him. The difference was clear. When Luke ignited his lightsaber, Vader stepped in. Father and son fought while Emperor watched and encouraged, as Palpatine wanted Luke to strike down Vader in anger. That single act would begin Luke's journey to the dark side. The fight moved through the throne room. Luke stepped back, trying to reach his father with words instead of fighting. He insisted there was good in Vader and refused to give up on saving him. Vader probed Luke's thoughts and discovered Leia's existence. The threat to his daughter made Luke lose control. He attacked with anger that surprised even himself and drove Vader back, overpowering him and cutting off his hand. For a moment, Luke stood over his defeated father, ready to strike the final blow. Then he saw Vader's mechanical hand, the same hand he now had. The similarity was impossible to miss. He was turning into what he was fighting against. In that moment, Luke made the choice that would decide his family's future. Luke's choice was the opposite of his father's choice years earlier. Anakin had struck down Windu to save Padme. Luke refused to strike down Vader despite everything. The son broke the pattern his father had started, and different choices led to different results. Luke threw his lightsaber away and declared he was a Jedi, like his father before him, refusing the dark side. Palpatine had not expected this. He was furious that Luke would not turn, and if Luke would not serve as a new apprentice, he had no value. The Emperor attacked Luke with Force lightning. The attack was meant to kill Luke, who had no defense and called to his father for help. This was the same choice Vader had faced with Windu and Palpatine years ago. Two people needed him to choose, and only one could survive. Vader made his choice. He chose his son, seized Palpatine, and threw him into the Death Star's reactor shaft. And the Sith Master died, not killed by someone wanting power, but by a father saving his child. After 19 years as a Sith, Anakin Skywalker finally returned before he died. Palpatine's end broke the rule of two. The 1,000-year line of Sith Masters and apprentices was shattered because Vader had turned against his master not to take his place, but to save his child. But the act destroyed Vader's life support. Palpatine's lightning had passed through him as he carried the Emperor, and the suit's systems failed while the breathing machine struggled. He was dying, but he had saved his son. With what little time remained, Luke dragged his father toward a shuttle, and Vader asked him to remove the mask. He wanted to see his son with his own eyes, just once, without the helmet in the way. Luke lifted the helmet away, revealing a face that was pale and scarred. Anakin Skywalker had not seen natural light in 19 years. The helmet's lenses had filtered his view of the world the entire time. He had lived trapped, both inside the helmet and in his mind. Now, at the end, he could see his son clearly. The face looking back at him showed compassion, not fear, and love, not hatred. Everything the Sith taught was wrong, and everything the Jedi warned about had saved him. His eyes had trouble seeing without the helmet, but he could see his son, and that was all that mattered. Vader's final words were a message for his daughter. Tell Leia that Luke had been right about him. He had known about Leia all along, keeping the knowledge hidden to protect her from Palpatine. In his last moments, he wanted both his children to know who he really was at the end. After everything, all the killing, all the hurt, Anakin Skywalker's last act was saving his child. His story that started with a mother he could not save ended with a son he chose to save. Luke escaped the Death Star with his father's remains and cremated them on Endor that night, following Jedi tradition. The armor that had held Vader for 19 years burned, and Anakin Skywalker was finally free. But what redemption means is still unclear. One act of sacrifice did not erase decades of harmful actions. Both happened, and both were real. What can be said is this. At the final moment, when the choice was most clear, Vader chose love over power. He chose his child over his master. The choice did not undo his previous actions, but it determined how his story ended. At the celebration on Endor, Anakin Skywalker's spirit appeared alongside Obi-Wan and Yoda, showing he had become one with the Force. The Empire survived Palpatine's death, but lost its leader, and the rebellion became the foundation of the New Republic. Luke Skywalker inherited his father's power without his father's hard childhood, while Leia Organa continued her work in galactic politics. She knew Vader was her father, but she did not forgive him, and she did not need to. The Skywalker bloodline continued through Luke and Leia. Their children and grandchildren would face their own challenges, but the Force remained strong in the family Vader had tried to protect and almost destroyed. How history judges Vader depends on who you ask. To the rebellion, he was someone who caused great harm. To Imperial loyalists, he was a figure who turned against his master at the critical moment. To his children, he was something more complicated, and each view contains some truth, but none contains all of it. Luke chose to believe his father had been saved, burning the body with respect and calling his father Anakin Skywalker instead of Darth Vader after that. Whether he deserved justice or forgiveness cannot be answered here. The facts show what happened. Causes led to effects, and choices led to results. Only the people who lived through what he did can judge him, and the survivors get to decide whether to forgive him or not. Leia had a different view. Her planet had been destroyed and her people scattered. The man responsible was her biological father. She acknowledged the relationship, but did not embrace it. Her choice was also valid, maybe more right because of what she lost. Vader's transformation from Anakin Skywalker to redeemed father spans 4 decades. Beyond this narrative lies the story of his secret apprentice, a violation of Sith law that nearly cost him everything. Understanding that apprentice's fate also illuminates why Palpatine's lightsaber became an object of dread throughout the galaxy. Be sure to watch these videos next.